to see and listen to remember and accept. I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's a joy to see you here, whether you are in person, and I'm imagining everyone who's in the virtual field as well. Thank you for joining this morning. And for those who might not know me, my name is Tenzen David Zimmerman, and I have lived here at Zen Center for 24 years and currently serve as the central abbot of San Francisco Zen Center. And I don't know if anyone who's new, you may have, or just recently returning, that we got around to renovating the Zendo. It's still a work in progress. In a month we'll have a door to the Gaitan and a new way to circulate air in this space. So looking forward to the reopening of the building, which will happen in January. So I'd like to begin this morning with a koan. And this is a koan, or Dharma story, And this is case 36 from the Mumonkan. Mumonkan can also be translated as the Gateless Gate. And the title of this particular koan is When You Meet a Person of the Way. And it goes like this. Wuzu said, when you meet a person of the way on the path, do not meet them with words or silence. Tell me, how will you meet them? When you meet a person of the way on the path, do not meet them with words or silence. Tell me, how will you meet them? And as is often the case with koans, Mumon, the person who collected all the koans that were put into the Mumonkan, has a comment to go with the case, in which he says, in such a case, if you can manage an intimate meeting, it will certainly be gratifying. But if you cannot, you must be watchful in every way. And then he also includes a small verse or a poem in which he says, meeting a person of the way on the road, meet them with neither words nor silence. A punch on the jaw. Understand if you can understand directly. So Wuzu Faiyan was an 11th and 12th century Chinese Chan master. His Japanese name is Gozo Hoen. And in time, Wuzu became the teacher of Yuanwu, who edited another collection of koans, the Blue Cliff Record. And Wuzu here appears in several koans in the Mumonkan, including in case 38, for those of you who might know it, this is Wuzu's Buffalo Passes Through the Window, as well as case 35, Zanjo and her soul are separated. And so in our koan today, Wuzu poses a question to his students. Meeting a person of the way, don't use words and don't use silence. How will you greet them? So now our first two questions, perhaps, as we enter into this particular case, is first, what is the way? What is the way? And second, who or what is a person of the way? The way, often it's kind of translated from the word Tao, is a path or a road. That's its traditional meaning, and in Chinese Taoist and Buddhist understanding, the way of the Tao is also the natural order of the universe. The way, you could say, the way things are, meaning the way that all the myriad causes and conditions have come together throughout time and space and have unfolded and ripened as just this moment, just this reality here and now, what's manifesting. And a person of the Tao, a person of the way, is one who understands this natural order, understands that causes and conditions have come together to manifest right here and right now. Right? And you could also say that, and this might be a accomplished practitioner, an adept, or it could be a Dharma teacher, or they could be anyone who is on a spiritual path who is awake and who lives in an awakened way. So it's not necessarily limited to, if you will, the Buddhist tradition. However, I think I might suggest that we can also venture to say, by virtue of your being here today and participating in this Dharma practice, that you are each persons of the way for this very moment. Right? And I imagine you too, at some level, are wanting to know how to meet and live in accord with reality, with the way things are, particularly in a way that brings you less suffering and those around you. So when you meet another person of the way, maybe when you meet each other here, how will you greet them? And is this going to be different? If you meet a person of the way, you're going to greet them differently than you would an ordinary person? And does a person of the way look a certain way? Do they act in a certain way? And furthermore, if we're talking about the way, the path, what does that look like? How broad or narrow is it? And are there particular places along the way that you're going to meet these persons of the way? I'm going to return to this koan in a little bit to explore it with you, but I want to make a brief detour and talk about some traveling along the way that I have done over the last 6 months. I've been traveling quite a bit, both in the US and overseas, mostly to visit other Dharma centers and monasteries and attending conferences and participating in several very special ceremonies that were held to, in large part, to acknowledge and honor our Soto Zen ancestors and the transmission of Zen to the next generation. And so over this period of time, this particular koan has kept coming back to me. And as you can imagine, I have encountered during this time scores of persons of the way. I can say that whether I was exchanging words, having conversations with them, or simply sitting in silence with them, that I was touched and inspired by their sincere practice, by the sincere practice of everyone that I met during this time. So let me see. In April, I joined over 100 other people in going to Japan, people from the West, going to Japan to participate in the 700th anniversary tour and celebration of Keizan Jokin, who's considered one of the key founders of Soto Zen. And this particular tour included visits to Eheji, which is the temple that Ehe Dogen, our primary founder of Zen, founded, and then Sokoji, which was founded by Keizan himself, and then also had the opportunity to go to Rinzo-in, which is the family temple of Suzuki Roshi, near Yokohama. And I found it particularly powerful to be able to visit these temples, and this was the first time that I had been to any of these temples, to visit them, to see them, have this sense of history and deep practice, and the way that history and practice has inspired and shaped generation of, you would say, Zen practitioners over many centuries. And then after my trip to Japan, a month later, I went to Oregon and attended a biannual Gen X Dharma Teachers Gathering that was at Great Vow Monastery. And then in July, I went to Tassajara Zen Mountain Center, our monastery in near Big Sur in the Ventana Wilderness. And I was leading retreats there and spending time with the students. And then in September, the beginning of September, I traveled to Switzerland and then southern Germany to participate in mountain seat ceremonies at the Zen Buddhist Center in the Black Forest. Another name for that center is called Johanneshof. And finally, after all that, the latter part of September, I flew to Pennsylvania to attend the biannual conference of the Soto Zen Buddhist Association. So I was meeting a lot of people of the way and being in lots of places of the way, if you will. Aside from my time in Japan, particularly memorable was my visit to Johanneshof in Germany and participating in the ceremony there. Now, for those who don't know, Johanneshof is a Dharma center that Zentatsu Richard Baker, who was the second abbot of San Francisco Zen Center, that he established in the mid-1990s. And so the main event of the 4 days of ceremonies included a stepping down as abbot of Richard Baker, and then the stepping up ceremony, the ascending the seat ceremony of his 24-year-old heir, not 24, 44-year-old heir, Tatsuro Nicole Baden. And it was really wonderful to be able to witness these, I feel, really important ceremonies. There were quite a few teachers and old friends who have connections to San Francisco Zen Center who were there in attendance, including Huitsu Suzuki Roshi, who is Suzuki Roshi, our founder's son, and also his grandson, Shungo, was there, and then a number of Zen Center alums, David Chadwick, some of you might know David Chadwick, Norman Fisher was there, Fu Schrader, Tova and Vicky were also able to attend. And it was important for me to be there for two reasons. First, as a healing gesture between San Francisco Zen Center and Baker Roshi. Now, I was not around at Zen Center in the 80s and during the events that surrounded Richard Baker's departure from Zen Center and the impact of those difficult times and the way that the reverberations of those difficult times still, we can still feel 40 years later in different ways, particularly around how we understand power and perceive power, give power and wield power at San Francisco Zen Center. And I'm not going to go into the details of what happened, just to know that there was a difficult parting of ways. And while I think my elders here at Zen Center are, and who maybe moved on from Zen Center, are the ones responsible for addressing the karma of that particular time and circumstance. As a member of the so-called next generation, I think I really want to do my part to support a process of healing and moving forward. So that's why I wanted to be there to honor Richard, to honor the entirety of his legacy, and also to support the transition that was happening. And secondly, I had a wonderful connection with Nicole Baden. I had met her a number of years ago when she came with Richard to visit San Francisco Zen Center, and we ended up all going out to lunch together at Green's, and as we were departing, Richard and I think it was Ed Sadasan and maybe Fu were kind of still on their way coming to the front door, and I took Nicole aside and I said to her, I hope that as both members of the next generation that we could create new connections and transcending any past difficulties that our elders had or that our particular Dharma centers may have had, and be able to meet each other in a new and fresh way. And I also feel that it's vital for members of the next generation to Dharma leaders to have peers outside of their particular sanghas that they can connect to and find, get support from and counsel and ideas and inspiration. So I wanted to offer that to Nicole. And I expressed this at the ceremony. I was invited to join a panel, and this is some of the first things that I said at the beginning of the panel. And afterwards, many people came up to me really expressing their appreciation, because the whole Sangha there was very aware of the difficulties that had arose during Richard's departure. And really they were touched and said how meaningful and healing it was to have members of San Francisco Zen Center there to support this transition and honor Richard and Nicole, and also kind of strengthen the connection between our mutual sanghas. During the ceremony, I think this was a part of Richard Baker's stepping down ceremony. One of the gifts that he gave to Nicole during the ceremony was his kotsu, which is a teaching stick, just like this, that Suzuki Roshi had given to Richard shortly before he died. Right? So it was quite a powerful and touching moment to witness this literal generation to generation handoff, of the expression of teaching, expression of the Dharma, and this trust that Richard was putting in, giving to Nicole, that she would be able to continue and carry on Suzuki Roshi's legacy, and his faith in the next generation. And coincidentally, over this kind of 6 months of my travels going to different centers, there were a lot of conversations about how to prepare, pass on, transmit the teachings to the next generation and how to support the next generation. As I mentioned, I was on a panel at Johanneshof, and the panel included Shungo Suzuki, Huitsu's son and Suzuki Roshi's grandson. And the title of the panel were for us to address some of the perceived challenges for the next generation of Zen practitioners. So I got to speak to kind of some of the Western views of that, and Shungo spoke to some of what might be the Japanese challenges. And there was also a topic that came up at the Next Generation Dharma Teachers Gathering, and also the Soto Zen Buddhist Association. While while people still maybe consider me a member of the next generation, just because I wasn't a member of the founding generation, I'm at 61, I think I'm a little long in the tooth to be considered next generation. But I kind of perceive myself more as a bridge between generations. So a bridge between the founding generation and the generation that is already coming up, and after me, already stepping into Dharma leadership roles and wanting to foster a healthy and vital Dharma and also Zen Center. And so it's really sobering at times to reflect on and to consider the responsibility that comes with this transmission from the ancestors of the past to the ancestors of the future, and how best to support it. And of course, we can recognize a whole multiplicity of ancestors, including our familiar and our biological ancestors, the ancestors of our diverse cultural heritage, as well as the ancestors of our spiritual lineages. And each of these forms, each of these types of ancestors have their particular gifts which they are wanting to bestow to us, and for us to take up and to find ways to carry on and make the best use of. And so as a Zen priest, I represent a lineage of practitioners and ancestors that reach all the way back through Japan, through China, all the way to India, Shakyamuni Buddha 2,500 years ago. That's quite a heritage to consider. And while our particular familiar and cultural ancestors, in most cases they were not Buddhist practitioners, they may nevertheless have endeavored to find a way to be in harmony with the universal order as they understood it. Right before I went to Germany, I actually flew into Zurich, and I spent a number of days in Switzerland. And I intentionally wanted to go to the ancestral homeland of my Swiss-German Mennonite ancestors. And they lived in an area called Thun in Steffensburg, which is just north of Interlaken and not too far from the Alps. And it was fascinating to walk in that land and see and imagine where they lived and how they lived, and get a feeling of what it was to walk the path that they walked in that particular place. They ended up fleeing Switzerland in 1732. They fled religious persecution because they were Anabaptists. and eventually landed in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which I was born a little over 200 years later, and was able to go to their graveyard. The two brothers that came over, Hans and Christian Zimmerman, I went to the farm that they first created and to their gravestones that were still there. So quite a sense of this connection of place and time. We often think of our ancestors, whether there are Dharma ancestors or familiar ancestors, as people who are no longer with us. And I would say this is a mistake. Our ancestors are alive. They're in us. They're with us. So how are we going to meet these ancestors? How are you going to meet your ancestors? And I would suggest that one of the ways to meet the ancestors is by recognizing the ancestors in every single being whom we meet. So just looking around the room and acknowledging the ancestor quality of everyone here in the room, right? And when we live our lives with such an awareness, right? Seeing each person as intimately related to us in some way, we naturally want to be kind and treat the world, our mutual home, with great respect, great care. Right? And in doing this, we realize that what we do, everything we do, how we meet each other really matters. Right? How we live our lives matters. So we ask ourselves, how are we going to be good ancestors to those around us and for the world and for the earth? Okay, so going back to the koan I briefly introduced at the start of the talk. Wuzu said, when you meet a person of the way on the path, do not meet them with words of silence. Tell me, how will you meet them? Now, again, while we might traditionally think of a person of the way as a Dharma adept or a teacher or an ancestor, the truth is that every day we are meeting persons of the way, right? People who are actually teaching us, who are kind enough to teach us. And the question is, can we hear their teaching? Whether or not we like it or don't like it, there is still a teaching that is arising in our relating to each other and how it is that we show up and relate to each other, right? And oftentimes we might just say, well, I'm going to just, reserve attention to the person who's here on a Dharma seat or in the front of a classroom, has their microphone, and we expect that they will teach us in a certain way, but the invitation is to be willing to be taught by everyone and everything. Right? And not only is this question about how we meet others, but it's also one of how we meet ourselves. Right? How do we perceive and greet ourselves as a person of the way? And that means, are we able to welcome not only each other in whatever way other people are showing up, but how do we meet ourselves, the entirety of ourselves, everything that we are experiencing in this particular mind body? Are we welcoming it? Are we receptive to it? Meeting a person of the way, not using words and not resorting to silence. How will you greet them? So as I mentioned in Mumonkan's brief commentary on the case, he says, in such a case, if you can manage an intimate meeting, it will certainly be gratifying. But if you cannot, you must be watchful in every way. Now, Zen is fundamentally a practice. It's fundamentally about intimacy. Right? The intimacy of meeting ourselves and each other. Meaning so intimately that there is no separation. No self and no other, no you and me, no subject and object. And when we can manage such an intimate meeting, particularly with another person, whether they're a practitioner of the way or not, then Mumonkan says how wonderful it is, how gratifying. Right? Another translation has him commenting that meeting in this way is pleasant and joyful. And don't you feel that when you meet someone or you have kind of open-hearted connected to, there's a sense of intimacy, that it brings a sense of warmth, of joy, of ease, happiness. How wonderful that is. Right? However, if we're not able to recognize and meet another intimately, then Mumonkan instructs us to be watchful in every way, to be watchful in every way. In fact, this is one of the ways that teaching is offered in Zen Buddhism. We can teach with our words, sure, of course. I'm up here going blah, 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 and maybe you'll take something away from that, and then you're getting something from something I say. But more so, in many ways, we teach through our actions, what it is that we do. So as apprentices of the way, we are encouraged to continually watch, to observe, to mindfully observe. What is the teacher doing? What are others around us doing that might be a teaching for us? And so we look for and we observe others who inspire us, right? Who embody a particular way of being that we also want to manifest. And we watch them. This is kind of this part of the apprentice practice that we encourage at Zen Center. We watch them, what they do, how it is that they talk to people, how it is that they interact. Their way of being often teaches us about what it is to be practitioners of the way, more so than actually their words. And many people who had met Suzuki Roshi in person said that it wasn't always so much what he said, it was how he was. His very presence, his very way of being was a more profound teaching for them. And I know when I first saw the copy of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, that photo on the original issue on the back of Suzuki Roshi, I immediately said, that guy's got something I want, right? Whatever it is, even before I read the words in the book, I was like, he's got something, I want that, right? It's just his way of being inspired me to practice. Another translation has Mumonkan advising us to be alert in every aspect of your life and to every single thing. But the thing is, this is just our practice, right? This is Zen practice, paying intimate attention to everything. So in Soto Zen, we are encouraged to engage in all of our activities and meeting others with a specific kind of attention. And this form of attention is often called Mimitsu no Kafu in Japanese. Mimitsu no Kafu. And it was Dogen, apparently, who himself coined this particular term, which essentially means the careful consideration of everything. Intimacy with everything, as well as literally the family style. So those kind of three meanings come out of the words Mimitsu no Kafu. So this family style of Zen, one that characterizes all of Zen practice, is an exquisite, careful, considerate, intimate, warm-hearted, continuous attention to detail. It's a form of intimate attention. It's a non-dual intimacy that's both soft and also subtle, right? And a good deal of Zen training, particularly at a temple like this or at a monastery, is learning how to embody Mimitsu as one goes about their daily activities. So as you put on your robes, your clothing, sweeping the hallway, cutting the vegetables, washing dishes, putting together your oryoki bowls and so on. Our intention throughout the whole day when we're training is to maintain a continuous thread of intimate awareness in everything that we do. To stop and pause, where is my mind? Is my mind present? Is my mind connected to the activity that's happening in this moment? Or is it once again wandering in the clouds, right? To come back and be intimate again with the experience of the moment. So Mumonkan is encouraging us to keep practicing, right? Become accomplished in the way. Meet everyone and everything with this non-dual awareness. And the thing is, everyone, or I should say everything in the cosmos, is already doing this practice of meeting intimately. All you have to do is join in. Right? All you have to do is walk the path and be in accord with the way. Be in accord with reality, with the way things are. Doesn't mean you can't work to make changes, but first you have to start with, this is what is. Start with reality. This is what's happening now. And now, how do I want to meet it? Right? Skillfully. Furthermore, when Mumonkan asks, how do you meet a person of the way without words or silence, he's not just pointing to the intimacy of meeting all things, but in particular, an intimate meeting with all of reality. Another word I like to say that is all being, right? And what's more, Buddhism's underlying view is that this intimacy with all being is equally an intimacy with oneself, with one's true nature, with one's Buddha nature, awake nature, right? All of our Dharma ancestors, from Shakyamuni Buddha on, sought to awaken to and embody the Buddha way, this way of profound intimacy with our fundamental Buddha nature. So in Mumon's verse, or his poem, he says, meeting a person of the way on the road, meet them with neither words nor silence. A punch on the jaw. Understand, if you can directly understand. So meeting a person of the way on the road without using words, without being silent, how are you going to greet them? And this, without using words, means without coming from a space of separation, without coming from the ego self. You know, so often our words are really ways for us to put our ego out there, to put ourself out there, to reify ourselves in some way, right? We talk and talk just because we're trying to, reaffirm, I exist and I'm okay, and kind of, get everyone to see us and accept us in some way. And in doing so, we often create even more of a separation, right? So, speaking without words, without coming from concepts such as you and me, but instead coming from a place without words or sounds that referred to a separate I, right? Not coming from a sense of I. But then Mumon goes on to describe this way of meeting as a punch on the jaw, right? So he's not literally suggesting that if you meet a person on the way, you punch them on the jaw, right? Hello, Buddha, punch, right? Hello, or yourself for that matter, right? Wake up, right? He's not suggesting that. But he's really trying to describe a moment of true meeting, the moment of direct realization, right? When suddenly that place of separation falls away, right? And when that happens, it's often described as a shock, right? Little kind of the feeling of getting knocked out of your body in some way, right? Like a punch on the jaw might kind of do. And so many of the stories in Zen koans include instances of teachers, breaking the legs of their disciple or aggressively twisting their nose, which are really, they're shocking in a conventional sense. Yes, that's true. But ultimately what they do is they serve to trigger a profound awakening for the student, because they break the student's focus on their own internal mind and focus on something larger than themselves, right? This greater connection to all things. So they drop the mind, they drop the body, and they're just in this kind of suddenly, whoa, what was that, right? And again, in a sense, this awakening, even if it's shocking in the moment, it's really nothing special, right? And this is something we need to remember. We may have profound awakenings, but we don't need to then take it and put it on the shelf and go, oh, look at my profound awakening, it's so amazing, right? And then we want to tell everyone how great it was and so on. We're just making it another object and making it something else. You have to live your insights. any insight that you have, any moment of awakening you have, it has to be embodied, it has to be lived. Don't put it up here and make it special. It's not special. You have to digest it, right? Eat it. Eat your insights, right? So we don't need a punch on the jaw to wake up. Even the evening breeze, if you pay subtle, close attention to it, can be enough to awaken us to our true nature, right? To our fundamental oneness. You have that experience in nature? You go in nature. Many of us love being in nature because we feel at one with all being, right? We don't feel kind of the separation that we might feel in our day-to-day lives, right? So Wumonkan says, if you want to realize, just realize. Understand if you can directly understand. So it's that simple. But only insofar as we're able to let go of our conditioned, limited views and our concepts, right? Let go of our fixation on how we think things should be, or how we think others should be, or how we think we should be. Drop others' ideas and concepts, and instead allow ourselves simply to rest and expand into a space of unconditional awareness. Another way you could say that is into a space of unconditional love. Just allow ourselves to just rest in that and be held by that and be at one with that. And it's in this space that we realize we are already intimately encountering each other all the time, even when you don't realize it. Right? It's always happening. And of course, this endeavor to understand directly, as Mumonkan encourages us, is the basis of our practice of Zazen, right? Which Zazen entails becoming still and silent and listening deeply, observing deeply to the present moment, to what is, right? To such a degree that you become presence itself. There's no one who's being present. It's just presencing itself. Right? And this is Zazen. When we're able to, as Dogen says, drop body and mind, there's just presencing. The whole universe is presencing at this very moment in this particular Dharma field. Right? So when we engage in Zazen, we engage in the path of our Zen ancestors, who were also, like us, seeking to understand at some level themselves, this life, how it is to meet and live this life, and to do so with some measure of happiness and ease and purpose. Do any of you have that goal? Am I the only one? Oh, okay, a few others, right? So we take up Zazen, right? And as Zen practitioners, we all serve in some way as ancestors, right? As persons of the way to future ancestors. How we meet each other in the circumstances of the present moment now will determine the future. So if you want a better future, find a way to meet now in a better way, right? That will create a better future. Yeah. Given this, how then might we greet ourselves and each other as if we are already ancestors? You're already an ancestor, right? How will you take up that responsibility? How do you take up the responsibility for helping to shape the future by the way that you travel the path today? And this is what it is to meet people of the way, right? To find a way to truly meet and connect with all beings. And we do this outside of time and space, right? You find a place outside of time and space, a space that goes all the way back, if you will, generations and generations to the so-called beginningless beginning, and all the way to the future, beyond the end of the end, right? All time and space is actually only here and now. This is the only place that all time and space exists, right? So how do you enter into this present, timeless, placeless realm of being, right? And serve all life from this place, right? And so it's in this way when we truly meet a person of the way, we don't see other. And all there is the universe meeting itself. There's no time, there's no space, there's no names, there's no words, there's no silence. There's simply a profound, deep, intimate connection. Before I close, I want to share a brief prophecy. So this coming Monday is October 14th, Indigenous Peoples Day. And it's, I don't know how many people are aware, originally it was, began in 1992 in Berkeley. I just read this the other day, as a counter celebration that was held on the same day as Columbus Day, right? So, and Indigenous People Day celebrates and honors Indigenous American peoples and commemorates their histories and their culture. There's an opportunity to do that. And so I want to conclude my talk by sharing a prophecy attributed to an unnamed Hopi elder, an elder of the Hopi Nation in Orobi, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Orobi, Arizona. And apparently he gave this prophecy in June of 2000. And I understand that the word Hopi means good, peaceful, or wise human beings. Right? So our ancestors, we hope. And here's how it goes. You have been telling the people that this is the 11th hour. Now you must go back and tell the people that this is the hour. And there are things to be considered. Where are you living? What are you doing? What are your relationships? Are you in right relationship? Where is your water? Know your garden. It is time to speak your truth. Create your community. Be good to each other. And lastly, do not look outside yourself for the leader, or I would add, the teacher. Right? And then he clasped his hands together, smiled, and said, "This could be a good time. There is a river flowing now very fast. It is so great and swift that there are those who will be afraid. They will try to hold on to the shore. They will feel they are torn apart and will suffer greatly. Know the river has its destination. The elders say we must let go of the shore, push off into the middle of the river. Keep your eyes open and your heads above water. And I say, see who is in there with you and celebrate. At this time in history, we are to take nothing personally, least of all ourselves. For the moment that we do, our spiritual growth and journey come to a halt. The time for the lone wolf is over. Gather yourselves. Banish the word struggle from your attitude and your vocabulary. All that we do now must be done in a sacred manner and in celebration. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the ones we've been waiting for. It's been 25 years since this prophecy by a Hopi Elder was first offered. It was offered the same year that I moved into San Francisco Zen Center, I just realized, right? And so I would imagine you would agree that today we find ourselves in a time where the river, as he says, the elder says, the river is flowing very fast, and there are those who will be afraid. No, the river has its destination, Right? So perhaps the elders' 10, you could say, life considerations, maybe they arouse your curiosity, some sense of reflection. How would I respond to those? Some sense of inner wisdom about what it is that you want to do, intend to do. And maybe they, along with the teachings of the Buddhist ancestors, will offer you the encouragement to effect meaningful change now and for future ancestors and generations. So who or what are we waiting for? Now is the time to practice. As the adage goes, practice as if your hair is on fire, right? The urgency of it. How we meet the moment with all of its challenges, opportunities, joys and sorrows, how we meet each other is what sets in motion the conditions for the future. So everything we do needs to be considered in this light if we are to meet and care for the people of the way who come after us. So I'll conclude with an excerpt from Dogen Zenji's Ehe Koso Hutsuganmun, which goes like this. May the ancestors share with us their compassion, which fills the boundless universe with the virtue of their enlightenment and teachings. Buddhas and ancestors of old were as we. We in the future shall be Buddhas and ancestors. Revering Buddhas and ancestors, we are one Buddha and one ancestor. Awakening Bodhi mind, we are one Bodhi mind. Because they extend their compassion to us freely and without limit, we are able to attain Buddhahood and let go of the attainments. So thank you for your kind attention and patience. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for meeting all beings on the way as best you can. And thank you for being once and future Buddha ancestors. And I think now we have some time for reflections from you and questions. The form, as I understand it, is please take a moment to stretch and adjust your body as you need. If you need to stand for a moment, you're welcome to do that as well. Take a brief pause just to check in with our body. How's it doing? And then we'll take, I think, about 10 minutes to see if there's anything that you want to bring forward in terms of sharings, questions, and so on. So the Eno, there's the Eno. Kevin here has a microphone, so for the benefit of everyone in the room and online, if you have something you'd like to share or ask, raise your hand and Kevin will bring the microphone to you.
Thank you. I don't know if it's working. Yeah, okay. Thank you for your talk this morning. Really appreciate it. I've been sitting with and thinking about a lot this kind of paradox that I feel comes up with this idea around sensitivity to oneness or wholeness and how there is so much like multitude of experience within that. There's so much pain, there's so much violence. Mm-hmm. And staying open and sensitive to that also feels like a space where, to some degree, that becomes part of our experience too, right? Mm. So I was hoping maybe you could just speak a bit to that paradox. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So how it is that we're sensitive, can be sensitive and open to our own pain, but also the pain around us in the world that's for others.
Yeah, I think like that sense of connection, that mm-hmm. intimacy mm-hmm. also makes space for holding that entirety of experience. It's not just joyful, it's not just loving, it's also loneliness, longing, exposure to risk, suffering.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Beautiful inquiry. It takes a lot of courage to really be willing to open up to feel not only our own pain and suffering and difficulty, of course the joy, sometimes we even have difficulty experiencing joy for ourselves and happiness for ourselves, but then to open the aperture of experience and feeling, and to feel what, the difficulties particularly that others are experiencing, the great suffering. And there's so much suffering in the world that we are witnessing all the time. And it's so vital that we be willing to do that to the degree that we're able to do that, to the degree that we're able to open our hearts and our minds and feel and empathize with the suffering. For me, it's a matter of understanding, how do I, number one, not see separation? So going back to this place of oneness, as you also were pointing to understand the underlying causes and conditions for suffering, for the pain. The Buddha would say delusion. Not understanding our oneness, our connectedness, and acting from a place of separation, acting from a place of greed, hate, and delusion, and then perpetuating that in some way by creating further separation, you against me, et cetera, right? So understanding the foundation of what is it that creates a sense of separation, this perception of separation, and how does it create to a sense of suffering and great pain, right? So I find that when I understand, this is how suffering arises. Okay. For me, it says there's a reason for this. And because there's a reason for it, just as the Buddha said, there can be a way to resolve it at some way. So that gives me hope. So if I first understand that there's a reason for it and there's a way to resolve suffering to some degree, then I can take a stand there. And then also to be aware of how it is that I can, for myself, titrate the degree that I'm able to open to. Titrate means to kind of a little bit, right? So sometimes you're given medication or something like that. You don't take the whole thing at once, but you do it in little doses. And so there's kind of, and we talk about sometimes with trauma, opening or widening our window of tolerance in relationship to difficulty and trauma. Part of that is to open a little bit and then pause and see, how am I doing with this? How am I doing with taking in a little bit more of the suffering of the world? Taking in a little bit more news about what's going on. How is that landing here? Is there a way for me to be present with it? Is there a way for me to open to it, to acknowledge it, and not be overwhelmed by it? But if it's too much, then it's okay to say, okay, that's enough. I'm going to pause now, right? And then maybe the next time I'll try a little bit more, see if I can take in a little bit more of the suffering that I see around me. And again, doing that over time, but also finding ways to resource ourselves. So this is why I find meditation practice so beneficial. Coming back and just being here and abiding in this present moment body experience and seeing if I can be with this with some degree of compassion and care and tenderness and openness and understanding, then when I get off my seat and meet others who are suffering, I'll be able to take that same embodied experience of what it is to be with this one and share that with others, be present for and offer myself as a loving presence for someone else who might be suffering in some way, right? And even if they aren't right here in front of me, so often in the mornings I'll send loving kindness to everyone who's being affected by some kind of war, difficulty, suffering, on our planets, as a way to remind myself of my profound intimacy, my profound connection to all beings, right? And I can't solve all that suffering, right? But I can, just by extending the wish of loving kindness and well-being for people to be in peace and happiness, that helps me to have a loving regard and remind myself of my connectedness and remind myself what I can do just by meeting the next person that I meet with a little bit more openness and connectedness, right?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your question.
We have time for one more question.
Griffin, I'm questioning, not only does it take courage to stay in the middle of the connected world that's perfect and lacking nothing, and my own subjective suffering, which I need, or I feel that both the feeling for the higher and the subjective feeling for myself, my own suffering, that both are needed, but that my deepest wish to be of service needs to evolve.
Why do you say that?
Because I have, I guess, preconceptions that being of service is only motivated by a connection to all beings, and my personal suffering should not.
But you're one of those all being. You are a manifestation of all being. Don't leave yourself out of that equation. And of course, it's usually wise to start with this particular beingness, and continue. It's for me, it's a lifelong process. Continuing to this one and this being and all being. It's a kind of a dance between, in this moment, this subjective experience, and then this wider realm of connectedness. It's a going back and forth, depending on what's happening, what's arising for us. But, I know you well enough to know that your deep intention is always to relate to and come from a place of profound interconnectedness, profound relationship with all being, right? And sure, we get frustrated with ourselves sometimes when it's like, oh, there I go again, me, right? And we have this bodhisattva aspiration to be of service to all being, but often, like same with the loving kindness meditation, when we do those meditations, they often start with ourselves, and then, or with someone that we love, if we can't start with ourselves, and then we widen to, someone who's neutral, and then someone who's difficult, right? So it's this dance back and forth. Sometimes we can be in a grounded enough place where we feel connected to this one, and then we can turn and connect to a wider all-being and be of service in whatever way that is, right? But we can't denigrate or dismiss this one, because this one is equally an expression of all-being. Right? So taking care of this one, not from a only I matter place, but from of I and all being. I as an expression of connectedness to all being. Need to take care of this little corner of the world. Like Suzuki Roshi said, shine a light on one corner, right? You shine a light there, it will, in time, illuminate the entire universe. Because that light is everywhere already. Sometimes we can only notice a little bit of it. But over time, through our practice, the aperture widens and widens. But it is this kind of breathing process, right? So thank you. And thank you again, everyone. Enjoy your day. May you meet many persons of the way. And thank you for, again, your wonderful presence.
May our intention equally extend to every being and place with the true inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it.